You're standing in front of the garage, holding a budget-friendly table saw in one hand and a pile of lumber in the other, wondering if you're about to spend a few $100 on a machine that will sit idle, or if this is the tool that will finally make those weekend projects feel professional. I get that hesitation, the fear of buying the wrong saw, of ending up with a noisy, shaky mess that just adds more frustration than freedom. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. And I'm going to walk through exactly why the Jet ProShop i 10-inch might be the sweet spot for you, or why you might want to keep looking. First off, let's talk about the typical setup you'll face when you bring the ProShop II into a small workshop or a decent-sized garage. The 52-inch rip capacity means you can comfortably handle 48 sheets of plywood without having to resort to awkward double cutting. That's a real time saver if you're building cabinets, shelving, or even a simple coffee table. The machine sits on a cast iron base with a pair of cast wings that lock it down. They're heavy enough to keep the saw steady, but not so massive that you can't move it on a concrete floor when you need to rearrange tools. In practice, I've seen woodworkers roll it onto a rolling dolly, push it into position, and then lock those wings down with a couple of bolts, a process that takes under 2 minutes. Now, the first thing most new buyers worry about is blade changes. The old-school stop the saw, loosen a bolt, wrestle a blade out routine can be a real pain, especially if you're switching between a ripping blade and a crosscut blade on the fly. Jet tackled that with a quick-release riving knife and a redesigned arbor lock. In real-world use, the riving knife drops out with a single lever, and you can slide a new blade on without having to reach under the table or use a wrench. The arbor lock does the same for the blade itself. A half turn and the blade is free. That speeds up changeovers dramatically, and it also reduces the risk of finger injuries because you never have to get your hand in a cramped space. Dust is another practical headache. If you've ever tried to cut a sheet of MDF on a saw without a proper shroud, you know the cloud that fills the shop in seconds. The ProShop II comes with an improved dust shroud that wraps tighter around the blade, directing more of the particles into a shop vac attachment. In a typical weekend project where I'm ripping a stack of inch pine, the dust stays mostly contained, making cleanup after the session a lot less of a chore. It's not a sealed dust collection system, but the upgrade is noticeable compared to older models that just had a thin lip. One of the more subtle but valuable upgrades is the single belt design for the motor. Older table saws often used a two-belt arrangement that required periodic tension adjustments, a small but annoying maintenance task. The single belt on the ProShop I runs over a larger pulley, which means you only have one tension point to worry about, and the belt stays tighter longer. The result is less vibration while you're cutting, which translates to cleaner cuts and a smoother ride for the wood. I've taken a 24 through a rip cut at 5,200 revolutions per minute, and the blade didn't wobble, even at the higher speeds. The magnetic paddle switch is another safety-focused feature that's worth highlighting. It's positioned where your thumb naturally rests when you're feeding material, and the magnet holds it in the off position unless you actively press it. This prevents accidental startups if you bump the switch or if a child wanders near the tool. For anyone who shared a workshop with a partner or kids, that extra layer of safety can be a deciding factor. All these conveniences sound great on paper, but let's get honest about the trade-offs. First, the motor is rated at 13/4 HP. For most hobbyist projects and small-scale cabinet work, that's plenty. However, if you're planning to rip thick hardwoods on a regular basis, you might notice the motor working harder, especially at the higher feed rates. It's not that the saw will stall, but you'll feel the strain, and the blade might heat up faster, which can affect cut quality. In those cases, a 2 HP or 3 HP unit would give you more headroom. Another practical consideration is the size of the table itself. The 10-inch blade is standard, but the overall footprint of the ProShop II can be a bit generous for a cramped basement shop. The cast wings add stability, but they also require a clear space around the perimeter for the bolts and for you to maneuver the wood. If your workshop is narrower than 4 feet, you might have to sacrifice some clearance or look at a more compact benchtop model. Who should definitely consider this saw? If you're a weekend carpenter who builds occasional furniture, a DIY enthusiast who wants to upgrade from a basic contractor's saw, or